everyone, and welcome to the panel, Fraud is Not a Competitive Advantage, Fintech's Role in Protecting Safety and Soundness of the System. The topic of payments was in the news a lot last year, and sometimes not in the way we were hoping. Between Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the trucker convoy in Ottawa, and countless phone-related credit card and banking scams, fraud was top of mind. And while fraudsters may be active in the financial services ecosystem, so are fintechs. Ensuring safety and soundness in the system is to the benefit of everyone because fraud, no matter its origin, impacts us all. In this panel, we'll hear how fintechs are protecting Canadians against all types of illegal activity in the financial services space, from fraud, money laundering, terrorist financing, and more. On this panel, we have Aviva, VP Digital Payments and Cyber Intelligence from MasterCard, a global technology company in the payments industry. Their mission is to connect, empower an inclusive digital economy that benefits everyone, everywhere, by making transactions safe, simple, smart, and accessible. Next, we have Ron, Product Director, Enterprise Fraud Management at Central One, who cooperatively empowers credit unions and other financial institutions who deliver banking choice to Canadians by providing critical services at scale to enable a thriving credit union system. Next, we have Timur, Country Manager for Canada at PaySend, a next-generation platform enabling customers and businesses all around the world to pay, hold, and send money online, anywhere, anyhow, and in any currency. PaySend has a true global outreach with a clear mission to change how money is moved around the world. And finally, we have Hamid, CEO and founder of VoPay, a fintech-as-a-service platform that allows any company to embed financial services and payment capabilities into their existing applications, products, and services through a single and scalable API. They offer a simple technology layer that enables digital enterprises to seamlessly offer secure, fast, and direct bank account payments. And I'm Kelly, Director of Member Engagement at Fintechs Canada, the unified voice of fintech in Canada, representing the most innovative financial technology companies in the country. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to talk about this important topic. Before we get into the discussion, we have Aviva from MasterCard, who's going to take a few minutes to share some insights on the international trends in payments fraud.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And of course, on behalf of MasterCard Canada, very pleased to be here with you all this afternoon. So I'll start by saying that cybercrime is now a global industry, and by 2021, I haven't gotten the latest 2022 stats, clocked in at a $6 trillion problem. Obviously, masses of losses felt all over the ecosystem. Interestingly enough, Alloy, an identity decisioning platform, released a report just yesterday. And what they found was that 27% of financial institution respondents lost over $1 million to fraud in the last 12 months. 70% of respondents reported losing over $500,000 to fraud. And this will be very interesting to your fintech companies. Fintechs are the most likely to report higher losses, with 37% of fintech companies losing between $1 and $10 million in fraud, based on this Alloy report that was announced yesterday. So I thought I would just take a few minutes to sort of set the stage and talk about some of the top fraud types that banks are being targeted by, and that would, of course, extend to the fintech community as well. There's 5 of them. Account takeover, which we also call ATO. So if you hear that over the course of this call, that stands for account takeover. And that really happens when criminals gain access to a person's online e-commerce or financial accounts. And this often results in unapproved transactions and purchases. We're also seeing a significant rise in phishing. It happens in all channels, and that really is when a fraudster comes out and reaches out to you and tries to either get you to click on something or obtain some information from you. We're also seeing a ton of malware. This can take the shape of keylogging, where the bank's customer's computer gets breached by criminals who can then steal any passwords that are entered, take screenshots, record viewed web pages, grab any sensitive personal or financial information. And sadly, we have a number of examples in the province of Ontario alone over the last number of weeks where people have fallen victim to malware. We also see a good proportion of identity theft. And so that goes one step further from an account takeover attack, where the account is taken over and then actually more accounts, loans, credits, what have you, are falsified and illegally obtained. And then the last one is just good old plain wire fraud. Seen that, around for a long time, and it's not going anywhere. So those are sort of the big five ones, the big five that we see attacking financial institutions. And then, of course, there's some extra special ones that merchants are also experiencing. So card not present transaction fraud. Increasingly getting harder and harder to confirm that your customer online really is who they say they are. And we've seen a significant increase in card not present fraud across all networks since the pandemic. Account takeover fraud, again, on the merchant side. And then we're seeing a lot of friendly fraud. So items ordered online that are not being signed for due to reduction in human contact. I didn't get that. What is that? I didn't click that link. I didn't, order the Minecraft hat or the gun or whatever. So seeing a lot of friendly fraud taking place within the merchant community, or being addressed to the merchant community as well. So that's at a high level, sort of some of the fraud trends and how costly fraud is to our ecosystem today.
Thank you, Aviva. It was great to get an international perspective before we get into the specifics in Canada. Now, your average Canadian is not eating, sleeping, breathing payments like we all are. Until something goes wrong, most aren't really thinking about their payments much at all. What would Canadians be surprised to hear is a common tactic or channel for terrorist financing or money laundering? And how can we be better arming Canadians to protect themselves and each other against illegal activities with their financial services? Ron, let's start with you.
Well, I think many folks would still be surprised, and I know that I am, that, the number of scams that folks are falling for and the way that the money is moved. I mean, every morning I open my email and I see the note about the latest romance or grandparent scam. And this is, if you think about it, it's after years of education to the Canadian public about scams and about fraud. I even was looking just recently about the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center and the fact that, they've been around for over 30 years. They talked about losing, I think they had reported fraud or scams of $379 million in 2021, which was for them a 130% increase over the previous year. And I looked to see what the 2022 stats were going to come in at. And I mean, they're already up to $420 million. So we're going to see another increase in scams and losses happening. Once those funds are stolen, they're moved. They're going through mule accounts. We're seeing different payment types being used, wires, electronic transfer, even checks. So fraudsters are becoming much more sophisticated. They're really getting into social engineering. They're really working on increasing their chances of success. The Nigerian prince letter of past is no more. I mean, those poorly worded and coming on cheap paper that typically you could easily spot and know that there's something wrong with this. That's not happening anymore. I talked to a colleague of mine, and he's a Welsh speaker. And in fact, he got a phishing attempt that was written in perfect Welsh. Now, if you think about the number of Welsh speakers in the world, it's not a very big, population. And yet they took the time to really get right and target that directly at him. So I think I think they'd really be surprised at how much people still get scammed.
That is a very precise and specific and terrifying example. Thank you, Ron. Timur, what are you seeing at PaySend?
Yeah, well, what we see is, first of all, as a fintech company, first of all, we see that what people don't realize that they might be involved in illicit activity without actually knowing that they're part of it. So people are using different informal payment systems, transfer systems such as Havalas, and many times they don't realize they could be part of some kind of money laundering or terrorist financing activity. And as well, I think it will be a surprise to many Canadians to know that it could be a really small amount. It doesn't necessarily need to be a huge amount to be part of this illicit activity.
Yeah, not even knowing that you're part of the chain is
Absolutely.
okay. We're starting off real strong with the fear factor. I like it. Hamid, what do you see at BoPay?
Yes, I think past COVID, we see the digital transformation has really accelerated and forced many businesses that traditionally transacting through different methods to move their business online, and that has subsequently opened more opportunity for those bad actors to target those businesses as a vehicle to move money around. And I think the best approach to help Canadians on both on business side and consumer side is through education, to help them understand what are these potential cases. To Ron point, the letters that you get, the promotional, even at VoPay, we get approached by organizations that propose that they want to invest and they want to gather data and they want to use that data towards a fraudulent activity to take advantage of another organization. So we see various ways of approaches that and fraudsters and bad actors are always ahead of the game, and they are getting more sophisticated. So from my point of view, it's always important to stay proactive and continuously educate consumers, businesses, and your audience that are working with you.
At least that's some free market research, right? You can see what's out there and develop your product to fight it in real time. Aviva, why don't you close us off this question?
Sure, I'll amp up the fear factor a little bit, and just building on some of the comments that Timur made about not actually knowing that you're part of a scam. So we've heard accounts of mules who are muling money for money launderers who are approaching kids on Snapchat. And you know what? Like, if you send this, person $100, I'll do, this, that, and whatever. So they have no shame. They're going after kids. We also see, a lot of account open activity among the deceased. And if a fraudster can open up an account within 7 days of somebody dying, there are ways to open up those accounts without actually, they'll do the confirmation and they'll see that, this person does have a good credit history. Their death certificate hasn't come up yet. So there's that one, which we're seeing, constantly see. And then the other one that I find really interesting is, another good one is small business. So we see fraudsters who open up small business accounts. They do a soft credit check, again, similar to what you would do on a personal account. And you just sit there dormant, and they do a couple of good transactions here. They build up the trust of the bank, and then before you know it, lo and behold, the bank is like cross-selling credit card products to them, with a $15,000 line of credit. So yeah, I mean, those are some of the more interesting cutting edge examples that we're seeing fraudsters take hold of.
Even as someone who works in payments and is familiar with financial services crime, the one thing that's really sticking out to me that all of you have touched on is the precision and the individuality. Ron, you said it's not the mass letter going out anymore. These are very specific and targeted attacks, which is really surprising to me. I was definitely thinking of a more broad strokes when it came to crime, but it's really interesting how precise that these fraudsters have gotten. Now, we're all based in Canada, but we know that physical borders really don't mean very much anymore. And all of you have touched on the digital aspect of fraud. So what tools do you use, solutions do you offer to your clients to help them stay on top of what's happening internationally that may impact them? Timur, Payson has quite a global approach. Why don't we start with you?
Yeah. So basically, we cover over 30 sending countries and over 160 countries receiving countries. So, and what we see is since we provide services for consumers and for businesses, so we always try to provide access to our expertise, global expertise. So operating in those 160 geographies, we have to deeply understand local compliance rules, and we also monitor any changes in the compliance rules or legislation. And of course, we integrated with all the possible screening lists in all of those countries. And this is something that we bring to the table to our customers, whether it's business or a consumer. So for business, we normally, whenever there is a change, we provide information about the changes so they always stay compliant. And as well, we protect them from potential fraud. And again, because we have that wide international global outreach there. As for the consumers, so they protected by our fraud rules. And again, it's derived from our global outreach and our experience in the global payments.
It's great, helping everyone to not accidentally participate in fraud by making sure you're compliant in all areas. It's really helpful. Aviva, what about MasterCard?
Yeah, I mean, look, we sit in a very unique position in the ecosystem. And, we really have sort of an unparalleled visibility across really the world, right? And so we leverage that perspective and point of view by we've built a product called Safety Net. We built that product in response to growing market and regulatory demand for global payment ecosystem protection. And really what that means is, in English, sort of, taking purchase of our physical location in the ecosystem we can see all the transactions at a global level, and we can provide network level fraud monitoring for issuers and merchants, which help to limit the impact of global large scale fraud events. And this is not meant to act as a replacement for an individual issuer's fraud strategy, but an additional second layer of defense where we can see at that very high macro level activity emanating from a point of sale attack or a point of sale breach in Brazil, or all sorts of different things that we've seen fraudsters do and try to do, and so we do offer that service on our MasterCard networks as a second line of defense for those who participate on our network. One example of the way that we sort of break down international barriers for our customers.
Staying a step ahead, I feel like is going to be a common theme throughout this discussion. And that's a great example of, the fraud not transferring from country to country once you've picked up those systems. Now, Ron, Central One is a Canadian financial institution, but again, not limited just to Canada. So what does Central One do?
Well, at Central One, what we're looking at from the system standpoint, and that's all our credit unions across the country, is going towards a consortium-based approach, and we're implementing a fraud tool that is going to allow the entire system to share information. So just as it would be global, what Aviva was talking about, and finding signals in different countries, we're looking for signals in different places and sharing that across. And we're extending it to all different payment types, not just the electronic payment types. It was very interesting talking, when Aviva mentioned about teenagers being targeted, and we're seeing a very similar pattern, but we're seeing it with checks, in fact, and check images and remote deposits, because that's a whole new technology. And then they can, they're receiving by text a check image and saying, "Oh, deposit this and keep a portion of it and pass the rest on." And so we're seeing the same thing. We're also going towards really engaging and using artificial intelligence and machine learning models to try to detect these transactions and learn from as the fraud goes on. and that's also just part of a layered approach. So, we promote a very strong layered approach with our credit unions and with their members, starting right at that very, very first layer, the member themselves and the education component, and then all the way up to, different types of technology and services throughout at the credit union level, and then us as a central being able to monitor the network and see what's going on. And of course, a lot of our members are retail, but we do have business and especially small business, and that's where we're making sure that we're crossing over between the retail and the small business to try and identify those different patterns.
What a great service to, especially I'm sure your small credit unions who wouldn't be able to provide that level of oversight on their own and serving their communities. Hamid, what about VoPay?
Yes, we don't have international footprints, but our clientele operate globally. So we have both proactive and a reactive approach to both AML and fraud. And we look at it from two verticals of product-related activities and the industry verticals. So we have built monitoring tools that our customers can apply that will trigger certain behaviors on their platform. We also have launched an exchange program, which is mostly industry focused. For example, lending is one of the biggest vertical of our platform. And we see fraudulent activities of individuals across various lenders. So for instance, someone go borrow money from 10 lenders on the same day using an identity, and that will expose multiple service providers. So that will really help them to have proactive approach. But more importantly, on the AML and compliance side, we understand many of these businesses do not have the knowledge and skill sets to implement these services. They have expertise around their product and service. So we give them all the tools to perform KYC on the individuals that they're receiving money, and even further KYB tools from IP location verification. If someone is coming from overseas pretending they are Canadian or based in Canada, it might be identity theft. So various tools and resources to help them reduce the risk. And we continuously trying to innovate additional resources to really help them tackle both fraud and AML on their customer sides.
What a great fintech as a service suite of anti-fraud services you have. We've talked a lot about online activities. Two common fraud examples that have come up a little bit are, online activity but really online banking, and that is for sure here to stay. What are some of the risks associated with this increasingly popular way of banking, and how is your business addressing these risks to protect your customers? Ron, let's start with you at Central One.
I think with online banking, it's a lot to do even at the very and just banking in general. It's a lot to do at the start. Is starting with that KYC. So, understanding who your customer is or who your business is that's starting on, and are they a real person? And then once you've got them into your network, really applying judiciously things like multi-factor authentication. So doing it at the right step, and not maybe single methods, but even looking at, what are common compromise methods. So email is often compromised. Doing a multi-factor authentication or a two-step validation verification through email is still going to play right into the fraudster's hands. So then going the extra step and using a text, or even, I know things are going down the road of voice and different types of verifications. So applying technology in those steps judiciously at the right place when there is suspicion is probably something that's critical. And then also harnessing your data and looking at the the behavior of the member, and is this a normal thing? And so that's going beyond just what they're doing today, but what do they do on a normal, what's their normal profile? How do they look at things? And we've got all this information in our online banking system, so we can go find it. And so applying it so when that anomalous transaction happens, when so-and-so sends $5,000 somewhere, that's not a normal procedure that they do. You want to look and see and identify those suspicious transactions.
I guess gone are the days you had to call your bank and tell them you were going on vacation. Now they can use all of your data to see where you've bought your tickets and booked your hotel, to really get to know your behavior. Hamid, I know VoPay focuses on account-to-account payments. What are you looking at in this space?
Yes, I think Ron said it all. So we try to do some of the activities that they do, but I think the key points that Ron mentioned is during there are two stages. One is when you onboard new merchants, and then how you can protect your business towards bad actors or fraudsters that want to take advantage of your platform. And if you have onboarded a business successfully, how you monitor to make sure that you protect your business as well as their business activities. There are account takeover cases, which is very common with online banking, that someone has access to another person or business credentials, and they are able to log in and perform transactions, move money around. At the same time, there are those mule concepts that someone open an account for someone else's activity and hand over those credentials to them. So we have also applied certain tools and resources to monitor the activity of the account for both protection of our business as well as the consumers, and looking at some of the ways that we can have further qualification of doing the logging, which Ron mentioned, 2FA. We have just launched single login, which enables businesses that have, for instance, Microsoft corporate login or Google corporate login, that they can use that gives us more assurance that this has been through various layers of verification, so someone cannot easily hack those username and passwords and take over those accounts.
So not only vigilance at the start, but constant vigilance, and evolving. Sounds like always trying to stay one step ahead. I feel a bit safer in my accounts. Thank you. This is very, very calming for me. And so we talked a lot about financial services ecosystem today, but at Fintechs Canada, we're always thinking about the future of financial services for fintechs. Now, there's a lot of excitement around all the possibilities and benefits real-time payment will bring to Canada. While it's an exciting time for payment service providers, it's also an exciting time for fraudsters. I know each of your companies are just as focused on protecting Canadians' funds as you are about moving them quickly. Can you tell us about the fraud risks that real-time payments may expose and how you're preparing to address them when the real-time rail goes live? And on the flip side, what are fraud risks that we have now that the RTR will solve for the future? Hamid, let's start with you this time.
Yes. I think we already have a concept of real-time payments in Canada using Interact Rails, but it's through a different identifier, which is the email address. But the biggest challenge we see with real-time Rails is the movement of money at the speed of the settlement, and this is a haven for fraudsters that the second they have access to the funds and they move it somewhere else, so there is no way to reverse those transactions. So that's a major challenge that we see across various payment rails when it comes to real-time settlement. And I think that the best way to approach this in the future is to have a stronger onboarding program for merchants or sub-merchants, whoever use the product, to make sure they KYC and identify the users. They make sure they have their accounts protected from cases that we just mentioned, account takeover, because when fraudster or bad actor get access to their account, when they move the money, it's very difficult to reverse those transactions. So yeah, we just have to start getting prepared, hopefully when the real-time rails are here, that we will be able to protect the customers and the consumers.
That's great. And Aviva, what about you at MasterCard?
Yeah, I mean, I think to build on Hamid's point, I think, generating a real-time payment and facilitating the flow of funds is not really the hard part. I think the hard part here is really around the authentication and verification of both the sender and the receiver, as well as sort of who is bearing the risk. And then, that's hard enough to do in the domestic world, and then you layer on the cross-border and all the complexity of international jurisdictions, and becomes really difficult to manage. I think our position on real-time rail, obviously we own and operate a number of real-time rails around the world. And we have a whole series of models, both at the network level, as well as for individual banks that participate on those, or financial institutions, I should say, or fintechs who participate on those networks. We have a whole variety of models that leverage, machine learning and AI and all those great things to better identify trends, to prevent those payments from happening in the first place. Because as Hamid very eloquently said, I mean, once it moves, it's very difficult to recall that money, and really the network participant has, little to no obligation to do that. So I think that, AI and, machine learning are important. And then again, this notion of beneficiary validation, right? Building out repositories and data sets that identify the scammers of the world. And then of course, those, fishy transactions and whatnot. Somebody had said the romance scams are alive and well. And those become gray areas because, the sender really did mean to send that money. So helping financial institutions, fintechs, better understand who the person is or the entity is that they or their customer is sending money to help develop friction points along the way. Albeit those are difficult friction points to put up if you are letting somebody know that their bride to be or their husband to be is, not who they say they are. That's a difficult position to be in.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times when we talk about the non-fungible funds, it's around accidental. I put an extra zero on the end. How do I get that back? That's mostly what we talk about. But you're right, Aviva. Sometimes people purposely give that money away, and that's definitely becomes a grayer zone. So thanks for that insight there. Timur, what do you think about real-time payments?
Yeah, I think that it's a double-edged sword. So definitely speed and finality, as it's specified now, so creates certain risks. But on the other hand, I think this is also a much better solution than we have now with, say, EFT that can be called back within 90 days. So I think still, even though this particular method, RTR will create certain risk and opportunity for fraudsters. But first of all, such system already exists and they're in place in many countries. And PaySend has already experienced. So we are working in UK where we're using a faster payment system, or in Europe where we're using a step-up payment. And we're actually cooperating. We're working with MasterCard and Visa. So we're using Visa Direct. We're using Money Sent, which are almost real-time payments. So and we see that real-time rails are normally better and less prone for fraud than any delayed system, such as EFTs, and that creates uncertainty for a certain time of period when there's no clear vision of the finality of the settlement. So, and I think the risk will be there, but I think we know that we're not the first who would be implementing this. We can always learn from other countries and put the measures in place. But ultimately, I think it's a step forward and will solve more solving problem than creating that.
Okay, I'm feeling better and better as this conversation goes on, more and more safe. And Timur, you're right, that time in between, we've all experienced it, usually as an error, and you're not really sure where the payment is. And it shows up in someone's account after a certain amount of time. But that gap, while the non-revocable funds are challenging, that speed does help with that uncertainty. Ron, Center One, I think, is the number one volume of e-transfers in Canada. So Hamid mentioned we're kind of close to real time with e-transfer. So you guys have lots of experience in near real-time payments in Canada. What are your thoughts on fraud and the RTR?
Yeah, I think we're actually going to see that the fraud risks are going to remain the same. As was mentioned right at the outset by Hamid, it's the speed and irrevocability of the payment that really complicates the matter. It's going to be the same sort of scam or the same account takeover, the same fraud that's going to happen. It's the fact that the payment's going to be instantaneous and it's irrevocable, and then they can move it on and continue on. That's really going to complicate things, and that's where you have to get in front of that and be more proactive. And that's the approach that we're looking at taking, is a proactive approach, using and leveraging technology to evaluate transactions. You can't rely on delays and the ability to look at transactions if you follow that from a manual process. So it's really going to be leveraging that and continually learning and to evolve it. And you asked a question as well about maybe is there some stuff that we're going to see go away because of real-time rail. Thinking on this, I wonder if it's getting in, is that beneficiary confirmation, looking at where the downstream is, making sure that that's a legitimate individual or they've not been sanctioned previously, very similar to sort of AML work. And the other is, confirmation of funds, and can you actually confirm if the funds are available? Like perhaps it is, a check that's been deposited. We see a lot to do with bad deposits right now associated to real-time payments. So, if we can step up and get, move upstream and really confirm funds before they are transferred, that's probably at the initial step. I think that's where we're going to maybe see some help coming from real-time.
I think what I'm hearing from all of you is that fraud is system agnostic. Doesn't really matter which one. And you've all given examples of the same scam applied across different payment systems. And Ron, to your point, it sounds like all of this proactive work that all four of your organizations and fintechs across the country are working on will just be even more important when we move to real time. And we're already well practiced at this initial onboarding. So the RTR will, of course, move money, but another important component is the data that travels with the payment. And with all the progress being made to implement open banking in Canada, we're going to have more data than we know what to do with. And so while data brings more opportunities for benefits, it also brings more opportunity for fraud. So how's your company preparing for new challenges related to this data? Aviva, let's start with MasterCard.
So you're right. I mean, we are swimming in data, and the more data we have, the more opportunity, fraudsters have, I would say, to engage in social engineering to get access to that data and try to figure out, passwords and usernames and all that stuff. We're preparing for data. We have an army of data scientists at MasterCard. We've also acquired many companies in the data analysis space over the last number of years. Many of you may not know, we have opened our Global Intelligence and Cyber Center of Excellence in Vancouver, focused on the space around structured data, AI, machine learning, all of that great stuff to help our customers, derive, to help our customers make better decisions, I would say, better business decisions, faster business decisions, and also insulate our customers from breaches and crimes and things like that. I think as it relates to open banking, I think that's really going to help, again, sort of in that identity space. It will be able to, obviously do partial KYCs by relaying data elements, like account name and, owner name, balance, those types of things in the pre-qualification stage. So verified data that is delivered to the data requester in a straight through processed manner, I think is going to also improve customer experience. I think there's, it'll help, I think, with fraud and things like that, but I think it's also going to help businesses like better understand their customer and segment their customer and, qualification criterias and things like that. So, we're excited about open banking and all the different things that it can deliver to Canadian business and Canadians in general.
Sounds like you're well prepared at MasterCard for this onslaught of data. Timur, what about PaySend?
Oh, well, yeah, we understand well how it works. So again, because Europe is a champion in open banking, so it's been around for many years in UK. So well integrated there with open banking. So yes, and again, as any new technology, it creates opportunities and it creates risks, and it definitely gives additional data, provides us with sufficient data to build the more accurate risk scoring models. So which prevents, it helps us to detect the fraudsters, earlier than before they actually will start doing any harm. So, but on the other hand, again, it's depending on the implementation. What's important here is the security, right? So that because there's lots of personal information. So if security is breached, this could be devastating. So I think it's something that is extremely useful tool, but again, it should be taken very carefully.
I think after watching this panel, everyone will be being very careful. I think that's an ongoing theme. Now, we've talked a lot about different ways to educate Canadians, address fraud, and promote safety and soundness in the system. So as we close out this discussion, what is the most important way to address financial crime in Canada? What's the responsibility of Fintechs, and how are Fintechs leading in this space? Ron, let's start with you.
So I'm going to say there's two things. One is that we have to continue public education. We have to inform our members, our users, our businesses that, fraudsters are out to steal their money, and how can they recognize and don't fall for scams. I know, and like I said earlier, I can't believe that we still see it every day, people falling for that. The second, I think a lot to do with account takeovers and looking at or things that happen that way. We have to really put in, strong cyber protection and good KYC up front. So we really have to take advantage of the technology that we can leverage, or also just the data and the knowledge of our members and our users and our businesses. And we really have to, basically do everything we can to take advantage of that and apply it to detecting fraud.
That's great. Hamid, what about you?
Yeah, that's great. To Ron's point, we are also focusing on education, and I think it's every fintech responsibility to not only educate their customers, but make sure their team are also educated and understand the various aspects of risk, because these activities such as fraud or money laundering does not always happen outside the organization. Sometimes there are also initiated within the organization. But other than that, I think we at WOPay look at as a first line of defense for our customers. So we always try to provide them with the resources and tools to ensure that they stay compliant and prevent money laundering or fraud. Again, to Ron's point, KYC, KYB, that how ensure that the customers they are servicing are in good standing, or they are not on various watch lists. I mentioned that earlier. We know many of these businesses are great at what they do, but they don't understand various landscapes of money laundering or terrorist financing, etc. Some of them don't even know those terminologies, such as what is PEP. So we try to educate them and help them with tools and resources to make sure they don't get targeted, and help them to focus on what they are good at by providing them those tools and resources to protect their business.
That's great. I'm seeing a common theme here. Timur, what about you at Payson?
Yeah, totally agree with Ron and Hamid. So that education is the only way to go. And in addition, we also have internal training for our staff, which is mandatory every year. So because we understand that, as Hamid mentioned, that it's not only external threat, it's also from internal. And that's why I think it needs to be a holistic approach for internal and external education.
Yeah, it's important to look in and understand that we can also be victims of fraud.
Absolutely.
We could also be the unknowing participants. Aviva, you get the last word.
I mean, there are so many great ideas, so many great things, right? I mean, education for sure, stopping the criminals right at the front door, always a great idea. You know, I think one that hasn't really been mentioned is this notion of like, we need more sharing of data. We really need to be able to see, across the network, what happens when the money leaves bank A and goes to bank B? What does bank B do with it? And does it go to bank C? And so that we can actually stop these criminals. And, of course, we can somewhat do that. The networks can do that somewhat, Visa, American Express, MasterCard. But, there's other networks out there, account to account and real-time rail and all sorts of things where I think, more data sharing would be helpful.
Yeah, because you guys have all brought up examples of seeing patterns helps prevent fraud. So if we could expand that across all systems, we'd be in much better shape, I'm sure. Thank you, everyone, for your time today to discuss this really important topic. In payments, we use a lot of acronyms. And sometimes when you talk using AML, AFT, KYC, you forget that there are real people behind those letters. And the illegal activity that we discussed today affects all Canadians. So we appreciate your commitment to collaboration and in the fight against crime in financial services. I'm sure everyone watching enjoyed our conversation as much as I did and probably left feeling a balance of fear and reassurance based on all that you shared today. For those that are interested in the products and services that were mentioned today, you can find links to each of our speakers' websites below this video. And for more panels on topics of importance to FinTech in Canada, visit our website at fintechscanada.ca. Again, thank you to our panelists for your participation and thoughtful comments on this important topic.